This NFL Most Valuable Player segment is brought to you by IBM. Quarterback John Brodie joins the 49ers in 1957 and becomes one of just 5 men in NFL history to pass for more than 30,000 yards. By 1970, he withstands 4 coaching changes to be named the league's most valuable player. The only thing that eludes Brodie throughout his illustrious career is an NFL championship.
From the men who brought you basically a sports show, if your football fix wasn't met on Thursday night, it's time for an additional slice. This is basically a football show right now. Let's go!
Stewart with time, lets it go. He's got 3 people down there. The ball's up in the air. Caught! Touchdown! Caught by Westbrook for a touchdown!
Miller, flush. Watch the throw. Now he's going to do what he can with his legs. No, he will throw. Lobs it to the end zone. Touchdown! Devin Smith.
Urbanisi sits. Loads up. Heaving one deep. And it is caught! Dylan Strong! Do you believe it? Arizona State wins on a Hail Mary!
Good evening and welcome, everybody. I'm Kirk Herbstreit along with Brent Musburger.
Ladies and gents, welcome in. Episode 12, I believe, of basically a football show, season 2. And Greg, we're going to do another flip. We're going to start with college this week because if there was a first ever elimination Saturday in college football, at least at the FBS level, we had our first one this Saturday, and it was fantastic.
It was really something. We had 4 teams that saw their chances take a real big hit. We've got a couple teams that are moving into the picture, and it's just going to be a crazy end of the season. But Saturday was incredible, just incredible.
Definitely. I mean, we have some crazy ends in college football just because of how it kind of shapes up. But this is easily the craziest with all the scenarios that we now have for the college football playoff. But no need in delaying. Let's get into it because
real quick,
there's a lot to talk about.
To the people that all said that a playoff would ruin the regular season, are you kidding me?
Yeah, that's not true at all.
Not at all.
We'll quickly breeze through Thursday where Clemson, number 21 Clemson, a tough road test at Wake Forest. They won 34-20. Good job for you, Clemson. Almost pulled a Clemson and until they realized that Wake Forest is terrible. So congratulations to you. Clemson, though, they still have a lot to play for because I think the way it works is if they're ranked at a certain level, they could be chosen for the Orange Bowl still if Florida State goes on to the playoff. So that's what they have to play for. So good luck with that, Clemson. But we moved to Saturday, the big Saturday that it was. And Mississippi State taking on a juggernaut in University of Tennessee Martin.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, 45-16.
It was a tune-up for this weekend's game. SEC does that. They schedule scrimmages.
Yeah, they've got some stuff on the horizon, and we'll get to all that because that's just the SEC now gets to get through its bye week, a.k.a. playing a weak team, and then playing the juggernaut teams. Florida State, another tight game early. They were losing after the first quarter again for like the 6th time this season. But they put together 21 points in the fourth quarter and pull away from Virginia 34-20. Florida State just,
not impressive.
25 straight wins. But we said it the whole time. They've done this nearly every week where they're down after the first quarter. And they can do that against Virginia. But as soon as they get to the playoff, or heck, when they get to the ACC title game and they play a very staunch Duke Blue Devils team, we'll see what happens. But they're I think they're one and done when it comes to the playoff.
I do too, and I think that after seeing what Arizona State did to Notre Dame on Saturday, their win over Notre Dame loses some of its luster too. Because they had a hell of a time beating Notre Dame. We've said it all season long with this Florida State team. They're a good team, but I do not think they are deserving of the ranking they have at this point, which is number 2. I just don't think they deserve it. They have not impressed me all season.
Well, they're the defending national champ. They're undefeated. They're going to be right up there with everybody else.
Yeah, until the Duke Blue Devils take them out in the ACC title game, and then real mayhem.
Wouldn't that be funny?
It would be great.
Wouldn't that be amazing?
Mayhem would ensue. And then what do you do with the Blue Devils? But we can talk about that when we get to the playoff. But yeah.
They probably just give them to the Orange Bowl. I doubt that they get to the playoff.
Yeah, probably not, unfortunately.
But let's get to the real meat of this college football Saturday, and we'll start in Auburn with number 3 Auburn taking on Texas A&M. Texas A&M, they suspended Kenny Hill, their normal starter, going into the game. And so backup Kevin Allen was the starter for the Aggies. And we all kind of figured the way the Texas A&M's played the last few weeks, they got rolled 59-0 by Alabama. They got demolished by Ole Miss. This will be another walkover game for Auburn, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not the case at all.
That was the plan.
Yeah, not the case at all. Texas A&M hung tight with Auburn in the first quarter, 14-14. Second quarter, though, Texas A&M 21 points to pull ahead for a huge halftime lead and held on to it late. As Auburn made the comeback, they got the ball back with a lot of time, only down 3, 41-38. Auburn's driving. They get inside the 5-yard line, and they fumble the handoff, and Texas A&M recovers. So Texas A&M backed up on the goal line, but all they got to do is run the ball and kill the game. They almost get stuck in the end zone. They inexplicably run this toss sweep thing that barely gets over the goal line, and they're able to punt it away. But Auburn, I think they still had like 3 minutes left at the time.
Plenty of time to work with, yeah.
Oh, plenty of time. They go down. They get to I think the 14, and they fumble the snap. Texas A&M recovers and runs out the clock to beat the Auburn Tigers 41-38, effectively knocking Auburn out of the playoff picture.
Well, you got to think if you're Auburn, your national championship hopes went right out the window because you couldn't hold on to the ball twice.
Well, in this, we talked about all the other elimination games. This wasn't one that we had on the radar as an elimination type game.
Not
Auburn
at all.
was supposed to win this game handily,
Exactly.
and they let Texas A&M's essentially their third-string quarterback, true freshman quarterback, throw for 277 yards and 4 touchdowns on them.
And again, I want to point this out again with the Johnny Manziel thing. Every time this happens with an A&M quarterback, Manziel looks a little less appealing.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, we didn't have this one on the list as an elimination game. I don't think we even talked about it as a possible upset. It just wasn't on the radar. And Texas A&M comes along, and in a weekend that we already had 3 elimination games, they decide we're going to give you a 4th one. And Auburn, I think they're done at this point, unless a lot of things happen. That's it for them. But
yeah, well, because even they're behind Ole Miss, I think, in terms of 2 lost teams in the SEC now. Despite Auburn beating them, you look at how Auburn beat them, and it was by a slim margin. And the guy got tackled going into the end zone for the game-winning score, tore his Achilles, fumbled the ball, and so they were literally inches away from a loss. If that guy even holds onto the ball while he falls into the end zone instead of having the ball stripped when he gets injured, Ole Miss still wins that game, and then Auburn was already down before this week. So it's all Auburn can do now is try to play the role of spoiler, and they could still get to the SEC title game if certain things happen. But that's the best they can hope for is some chaos in front of them, and they have to win out.
A lot of things would have to happen for them. We would have to. I think
Mississippi State would have to lose to Alabama and Ole Miss, and then Auburn would have to beat Alabama.
Right.
And I think that would leave us with a 3-way tie in terms of 2 lost teams, maybe a 4-way tie.
All of that would have to happen for Auburn. And then on top of that, they'd have to win the SEC title and hope that Oregon and TCU and Baylor, some of the other teams, end up with a second loss. That's really – there's still a chance, but it's like a lottery ticket chance for them to still get into it.
Yeah. Gus Malzahn, that was his first loss at home since he took over the Auburn job. And it was Kevin Sumlin's second win in 2 games against top 3 teams in the AP poll on the road. So
you don't want to play the Aggies if you're ranked high, I guess.
I guess so, but good win for the Aggies. They're 7-3. They're still a very good team. Probably going to get a nice little bowl slot when it comes down to the end of the day. But the Auburn Tigers' playoff hopes dashed against the rocks. I mean, it's funny because people brought up all the miracle wins they had last year en route to the national title game.
Right.
And then they have something like that go against them where they fumble twice, inside their own, inside the red zone. But
I guess everything does equal out in the end, yeah.
Yep. We'll go on to the number 4 team in the country, the Oregon Ducks. They had a hell of a time against Utah in Utah. And this game could have been a whole lot different if not for one single play. Oregon, I mean, it was tight, and then in the fourth quarter, Oregon pulled away with a 51-27 win. They also scored 24 points in the second quarter. But I believe it was in that second quarter where Utah looked to have like a momentum-swinging play, a 74-yard touchdown pass. And as the receiver is running into the end zone, he drops the ball before he crosses the goal line. Oregon then picks up the ball and returns it 100 yards for the touchdown, and that's a nice 14-point swing that propelled Oregon forward and into a victory.
I don't understand why players do that. I don't understand. Look, once you're in the end zone, do what you want, but wait till you get there first. That was such a huge momentum swing because Utah's a tough team. They're really tough to play at home, but I think that play it killed the whole team. They're like, we just gave away 14 points, basically, and it's just hard to mentally come back from that, and then the Ducks just pulled away. But it could have been a completely different game without that idiotic play, but that was just a really dumb thing to do.
Yeah, Oregon, they're because of Auburn losing, they're probably going to move up to number 3.
I think that Oregon's in the driver's seat right now as far as the whole thing goes. They are the team with really no serious tests left. They've got all the teams in front of them are going to be playing tougher games down the road, and the Ducks put themselves in a position where they control their own destiny all the way to the end of this thing, I think.
Yeah, I mean, the only tough spot they're probably going to have is in the Pac-12 title game, and if they play against Arizona State, it might be tough, but if ASU somehow fumbles down the stretch here and they have to play either Arizona or UCLA, then it's probably a little bit easier for Oregon. But, they're putting out the stats, and Marcus Mariota, I think he kind of struggled there at the beginning of the season. I think now that we've gotten further on into the season, he has to be the favorite for the Heisman right now.
I would think so, yeah, especially with Todd Gurley being hurt. I think that he's probably the guy at this point, yeah.
Yeah.
Dak Prescott's still going to be in the conversation, but Mariota gets it done any way you want him to do it. I mean, he 239 yards passing, 114 on the ground. What more do you want out of a guy? Yeah,
he's an all-world talent. He's going to definitely be one of the top 5 picks in the NFL draft come next year. Probably top 3,
More than likely.
But Oregon moves forward. They stay 9-1. And right behind them, and probably going to slide up to number 4, if ever so barely, the Alabama Crimson Tide, with just another, knockdown, drag 'em out, tight game classic at LSU. These two teams just don't like to play a blowout style of football.
No.
LSU looked to give it to Alabama early. They were up 7-0 after the first quarter. It was 10-7 at half. 10-10 going into the fourth quarter. Teams exchanged field goals in the fourth quarter. Going into overtime, and overtime wasn't really a question. Alabama scored pretty quickly, and LSU, just some of the play calls they made in that overtime are kind of strange. But Alabama gets the win in overtime in Death Valley, 20-13. Now Alabama, after a pretty bad loss earlier in the year to Ole Miss, they're right back in the top 4, and unless they trip up, I mean, they still have tough games here against Mississippi State and Auburn, and things could go to hell pretty quick, but they control their own destiny again.
Alabama has a tough finish of the season. They've still got Mississippi State. They've still got Auburn. But I got to ask, when they were down and they had to kick that tying field goal, were you thinking the same thing I was, that here we go, Nick Saban's going to have to depend on a kicker to get the job done for him again?
Yeah, I mean, it was a tough spot. But I don't know. I think it's different when they play LSU because that's the type of game that they play. I mean, God, they played that horrible, 9-7 game a few years ago.
Right.
Or 9-6, whatever it was. The best defensive game of all time. Yeah, okay.
Sure.
That was an awful football game to watch, and I don't care who you are.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's kind of ironic, but yeah, they do pull it on the end with while getting 2 field goals from the kicker to keep it tight. But I don't know.
I'm not sure on Alabama. I mean, we wrote them off once. They come back and they destroy Texas A&M 59-0.
Yeah.
Then they struggle, but LSU is a pretty good team. So I don't know what to make of them, but they still have a lot of road to get through yet before we can start talking about them waltzing into the playoff. I mean, they face an elimination game this Saturday.
Yeah.
With
it would have been
Mississippi State.
Our friend Doug, Dr. Doug, brought up a interesting fact while the game was going on, that if LSU had won that, we could have been very much in line for a 5-way tie in the SEC West, which would have been hilarious. How do you break a 5-way tie? Just a series of 12 coin flips or something?
I have no idea. I mean, usually you've got a contingency plan for, say, a 3-way tie. You
could do 3-way ties.
But a 5-way? I don't know how you figure that out.
I think we're still in line for a possible 4-way tie too. If Alabama beats Mississippi State and then loses to Auburn, and then if Mississippi State loses to Ole Miss, I think those 4 teams would all have 2 losses, wouldn't they? I think so. Yeah. So we're still very much in line for a 4-way tie. Not that that's any
chaos could easily erupt in the SEC, and it wouldn't take long for it to happen. There's still. All the teams have at least one tough game left. All the contending teams do. Mm-hmm. So it could get very, very interesting, and I think it will. Which is why I think we might have a 2-loss team at the end of this whole thing.
Yeah, that's very possible. Let's get to our very first true elimination game, as it at least takes in terms of determining the winner of the Big 12. As Kansas State, number 7, traveled to TCU, number 6. And it was an all-purple Big 12 affair. And TCU, they were just all over Kansas State early and never really looked back in a 41-20 beatdown of the Wildcats. And the Horned Frogs probably going to move up to at least number 5. But I think this is interesting. We kind of assume that everyone's just going to move up the one spot because of where they're all at and that Auburn lost.
Right.
But I think it's interesting because of how the rankings are and because now TCU is going to be the, without a doubt, conference leader in the Big 12. Does this mean with this win, does that maybe vault them over Alabama into the number 4 spot with a big win against the number 7 team in the country?
But they have that loss to Baylor on their resume. Right. So why not Baylor? Baylor beat Oklahoma over the weekend, right?
Yeah. That's the thing that I still don't get is that why is Baylor so far behind was Baylor so far behind these two when Baylor beat TCU by 3 points, and I know Baylor lost pretty big to West Virginia. But
West Virginia is not a bad team. They're not national championship playoff contenders, but they're not
West
bad.
Virginia did lose to Texas over the weekend.
Okay, well, all right. So maybe they are a bad team, but it's. Yeah. But in any case, I think that in my book at least, Baylor's got the win over TCU, so they should be ranked higher than TCU in my book. I like TCU. I think TCU's going to. I think they're a team that's really. We might see them.
That's the thing too. Is technically in the Big 12 standings, Baylor is ahead of TCU because they beat them.
Right.
And so, yeah, they're both 5-1 in the conference and 8-1 overall, but Baylor has the head-to-head. So if we get to a point where because TCU has nothing hard left on their schedule, right? And Baylor, I think TCU only plays like Kansas and Texas, right? Something like that.
TCU has they have nothing really left that should be a serious challenge to them. Yeah.
Whereas Baylor, they still play. Their final game of the year is at home against Kansas State.
Kansas State, right.
Still going to be ranked and is still a very good team. So if we have it to a point where, both those teams win out, let's say, and TCU is still ahead of Baylor in the standings, like say TCU is in the top 4, but they aren't the Big 12 champion.
Exactly.
What do you do with that?
That's why it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out when the new playoff rankings come out tonight. Because Baylor, if they both win out, Baylor wins the conference. It's that simple.
Right. If they both win out, Baylor should be the Big 12 representative in this playoff.
Exactly.
If they're going to do it that way.
I understand that. I mean, looking at TCU's schedule, let's see what their big signature wins were.
They beat Oklahoma big.
Oklahoma. Okay, they do have. a better, like, quote-unquote resume. They got Kansas State on there. They beat West Virginia when they were still ranked 20th. They had Oklahoma State when they were 15. Oklahoma was number 4. But you can't take away the one glaring thing on that is that they lost to the team they're in front of. And that just doesn't make any sense.
Exactly. And the two losses are different. TCU lost by 3 points and Baylor lost by 20. It's not – I think that's kind of what's weighing them down. But if they're really going to put the emphasis on conference championships – then you're probably going to have to see Baylor leap back over TCU at some point.
You'd have to.
If that's what they're actually saying.
Here's the thing. The argument for that is that if you're going to – because I do think that if things fall the way they might fall, we're going to be having the committee taking a real serious look at 2 SEC teams, which that's fine. But you can't – if you're going to do that, you cannot put TCU in over Baylor. It just wouldn't be right because Baylor's got the head-to-head win. So – I just don't understand how it can happen. I mean, I understand TCU's got a little bit better resume. They've got a one more ranked win than Baylor does, but they still lost to Baylor. And to me, that makes the difference because they've got the head-to-head matchup. And when the two played, Baylor showed they were the better team. So how do you rank them ahead? I don't know. But it may all change up tonight. We'll have to wait and see.
It may change tonight, and again, we still have all these weeks. So maybe they slowly just kind of cover their ass. They slowly creep Baylor back up in the rankings, and then all of a sudden, hey, yeah, they're ahead of TCU because they beat Kansas State in the final week. I can see that sort of scenario happening, just so they don't look foolish. Because if it's a situation where, because let's see, Baylor's probably going to move up. Let's see, because Auburn lost and Kansas State lost and Michigan State lost and Notre Dame lost. So that's 4 spots. So they should be at the very least, Baylor should be at 8.
Right.
Maybe they should be at 7 because they should probably be over Ole Miss.
What concerns me about the committee is that they seem to have fallen in love with TCU a little bit.
Yes.
You've seen them climb slowly, and I really do think that there are going to be, maybe not the entire committee, but there are going to be people that put them in the top 4 after this.
Well, because if you remember the way the polls worked, not before the committee itself came out, when the polls were there, TCU jumped from like 18 to 10 or 9 when they beat Oklahoma, right. And then they lost to Baylor, and they went back down. And then the rankings come out, and then they flipped the whole thing, and they put TCU ahead of Kansas State and Baylor. And Baylor was like 4 spots behind those two, and it doesn't really make too much sense because really, when you beat a team by 3 points at home in a high-scoring game like they did like that, you're essentially even, you know?
Right.
And I know it was a game where TCU went up big and Baylor had to make the big comeback, so maybe they're putting stock into that. The TCU should have closed out that game, that they shouldn't have lost to Baylor. Maybe that's the reasoning to it. I know. But I'm just trying to find the devil's advocate on it.
And the thing is, you look at the top 25, the AP top 25, TCU is not number 5. And
right. And Baylor is right behind them at 6, though. You know, they're at least right next to each other.
I think that if anything at all, I got to hope that this committee, because it really, if they keep leaving TCU ahead of Baylor, it loses some of its credibility to me. Because you can't have the head-to-head matchup like that and not give Baylor the benefit of the doubt. So we'll know more tonight, but right now it just doesn't make any sense.
Right, and I mean, in some ways you can get in kind of a tough spot when you just only do head-to-heads because, well, Arizona beat Oregon. Why is Arizona all the way down at 19? Well, it's like, because, you know. But when you have two teams that are close enough like this that it wasn't just a freak upset victory, because, I mean, those happen. And if they're close enough like that, and you have to give the edge to one team over the other, you're going to use the edge that one team beat the other one. Exactly,
and I think that with these two teams, you've got as close as you're going to get to the old all things being equal type deal with Baylor and TCU. So it'll be interesting to see. But if it were me, I would give Baylor the nod over TCU because of the head-to-head win.
Yeah. But with the first elimination game, Kansas State, goodbye. You are eliminated. TCU still alive. The next up on our eliminator slate, a game you called, Greg. You called this from the beginning. I had a little doubts, but your Buckeyes lived up to your confidence.
To my hype.
Yeah, I mean, Michigan State was with them 14-7 after the first quarter, but a 21-point fourth quarter just vaults the Buckeyes to a 49-37 win in East Lansing, knocking off the number 8 team in the country. Greg, Tell me about your Buckeyes.
Well, first off, I want to say, and I don't say this as an Ohio State homer, I think if you saw the game, you'd agree, I don't think the game was ever as close as the score indicated it was.
Yeah.
The Buckeyes went in, and they handed Michigan State 7 points off of a turnover on a kick return, and the Buckeyes dominated that game from beginning to end. What they have done at this point is they've vaulted up to number 8 in the top 25. They went on the road. They thoroughly beat the number 8 team in the country. So Buckeye Nation, of course, is like, now we have to be in the conversation for the playoff. I am not ready for that yet. But I think a couple weeks ago I said that Michigan State and Ohio State had a puncher's chance. It's gotten a little better than that. Now Ohio State needs a whole lot of things to happen in front of them to get into the actual conversation. But at least they're at the point now where they don't need a complete miracle. They just need like half a miracle at this point. But they looked good.
That's the one thing with this game, and it's something that we mentioned last week. It's great for Ohio State, and now they're in the driver's seat in the Big Ten. But because they were 14, because they were so far back, and now they've beaten number 8, the Big Ten may not make this playoff because of everyone else in front of them.
Right.
Unless the committee really says, well, we have to value the conference championship thing, and they really just kind of throw teams forward once they win conference championships. This was a bad thing for the Big Ten. But thankfully, because of all the teams that lost in front of them, I think Ohio State might just move up to 7 or 8 at the end of this when the rankings come out tonight, and that would obviously help them out, because then they got to hope that either Oregon loses to ASU or Baylor beats TCU, and they can kind of slowly creep their way back up there.
Yeah, they still need a lot of stuff to happen to get into the serious conversation for the playoff. Like I think anybody past like number 7 or 8, even when you're below 6, I think you're at that point. You still need stuff to happen to get in the playoff. The top 4, as long as everything remains true, they will get in. But Ohio State, of the top 8, I'm going basing this off the AP top 25. Of the top 8 right now, I think has the least chance of getting in. There's just too many things that have to happen in front of them for them to really be seriously considered. Because no matter what you do, it was a great win against Michigan State, and it was nice to get revenge for the Big Ten championship last year. But at the end of the day, you've still got that god-awful loss to Virginia Tech hanging on you.
Yeah, and
this takes away some of the
so well outside of that one game,
Right, but some of the stain is still there from that game, and that's going to be hard for the committee, I think, to get past.
Yeah, it would have been better if Virginia Tech was having a better season, but they've been god awful since they beat. And it's one of those things where it's a stupid loss, and they know it's a stupid loss, and if they don't have that loss, they're right in the conversation with everybody else.
Yeah.
If they don't have that loss, they're probably at number 6 or 7.
I think even if that loss to Virginia Tech had been something that looked like a fluke upset, it would be a different story. But they got dominated by Virginia Tech. It wasn't close.
Yep. But so Ohio State, they knock out Michigan State. Michigan State's probably going to fall here a little bit, and goodbye to their playoff hopes.
Yeah, the Big Ten's still on the outside looking in, but they've got a better chance now than they had last week. That's what I would say about it.
Yeah. Well, it helps that all the chaos in front of them, so they just got to hope for a little bit more of that.
Right.
But Michigan State out, Ohio State moving up. Now the game of the weekend, Greg, and
oh, you're talking about the Rockets and Kent the other night, right?
Oh yeah.
No,
I'm talking about the duel in the desert. I'm talking about number 9 Arizona State, number 10 Notre Dame. Oh man.
I was watching that, and the first half I'm going, well, Zach is just having the day of his life right now. And then I'm like, all of a sudden, Notre Dame's creeping back. I'm going, now he's having a heart attack.
Yeah, but the beginning of this game, Everett Golson was terrible.
Mm-hmm.
Everett Golson was awful. 4 interceptions in this game, a couple pick sixes, and every time Notre Dame even had some sort of threat going into the offensive zone, he just fumbled the ball away or threw it away. And credit to ASU, the defense was fantastic. Great pressure up front, tight coverage in the secondary. The defensive line and linebackers were doing something pretty smart too, because Golson's a small quarterback. Every time he had a quick 3-step drop, they threw their hands straight up in the air and were tipping passes all over the place. So great defensive effort, and the offense was just clicking. Taylor Kelly and Jalen Strong and this young freshman DeMario Richard with a touchdown late. He played very well in this game. But ASU was everything we wanted to be. And then in the second half, ASU did what ASU's done a lot over their tenure here with Todd Graham. The way this team plays, they play fast, they play quick, and so when they get a huge lead like this early, they tend to they want to kind of just slow the game down and burn the clock in the second half. But the way this team plays, they cannot play slow.
Right, their offense isn't built. It is not built for a kill the clock type of game. They're just not built that way.
They have to keep attacking, and they kind of slow down, and so they get out of sync, and they're not moving quick, and the timing is thrown off. So they get these couple 3-and-outs, and then they're not scoring points, but slowly Notre Dame they get a touchdown here. They got a touchdown at the very end of the second or first half. That if they just held that off, I think this would have been a different game also. If Notre Dame was down, 34-3 at halftime, would have been completely different than 34-10, I think. But they slowly get back into it, and all of a sudden it's a 3-point game, and you're kind of sitting on your heels like it's 31-34, and it's the fourth quarter. Oh, my God. But then a great response drive by the Sun Devils to get the lead or extend the lead, and then just really of all the interceptions, this one's the least on Everett Golson. It was kind of an unfortunate kind of tip pass. Like the receiver got it, went off his hand, and then the receiver kind of flicked his wrist, and it literally went off his pinky, and just floated high enough for the ASU cornerback to grab it, run it back for the touchdown, and really seal this thing for a 55-31 win for Arizona State. Huge win.
Yeah,
a monster win for the Sun Devils, and they're right in the middle of this playoff conversation. If they win out, they're going to be right there in that top four, I have no doubt.
I think you got to take a good look at them if they win out. And, again, with all these games, still got games coming up with all these other teams. ASU's in a good spot right now, but they still have, at some point, and they still got the Oregon Ducks on the horizon. So that's something to keep in mind. But, yeah, and I think they exposed Notre Dame. I think we finally got to see that Notre Dame has not been as good as they've been ranked all season. This Sun Devils team, I don't think 4 weeks ago we were even talking about them being in the mix on this. Really?
No. There's been a lot of movement up front in terms of the rankings, and they've just been winning and winning some impressive ranked games here, and just adding onto that resume. And it's slowly built to now they're probably going to be the number 6 team in the country come tonight.
They're in a good spot. They kind of control their own destiny too. They've still got the game against Arizona left, so that's always going to be tough because it's a rivalry game. But
and that game always has something weird in it. That's the way that goes.
But if they win out, I don't know how you keep them out of the playoff there because they're going to have some pretty good wins on their resume. They're going to have the Notre Dame win. They'll have beaten an Arizona team that's ranked. They'll have knocked off Oregon more than likely. Yep. So if they do all that, you got to put them in. It's as simple as that.
Ranked USC, and back when they had that when they played UCLA at home and they got dump trucked. At that point, I was like, oh, well, maybe they're probably going to lose another game here. But they were able to, rattle off these last 5 victories. Right. And they went from a huge loss at home to UCLA to, like I said, probably being the number 6 team in the country come tonight. Yeah, they're going to be they're right in the thick of it. They've just got to keep winning, and if they win out, they're in. I don't know how you deny them. It's as simple as that. They're going to have just as good a resume as anybody else. And, especially if they can knock off Oregon, and we'll see. And the other thing to note, in the like last year when they played the Pac-12 title game and got beaten pretty soundly by Stanford, that was in Tempe, and, I don't know if that was any different. But now they're going to have it at a neutral site at the 49ers Stadium in Santa Clara. So who knows? Kind of halfway between Oregon and ASU. But we'll see. Both those teams still have to win out to hold on to that dream. Yeah, but the Sun Devils are right in the thick of it. And I think at the beginning of the season, neither one of us would have bet on this at this point in the season, that they would be right in the middle of things. No. But Notre Dame, they're also exactly what we thought of Notre Dame. This was the type of game that we were waiting for them to have. They were just on the precipice of it all season. And, literally all the problems that they've had all season kind of manifested themselves in that first half. And, if it wasn't for the sloppy second half by Arizona State and them being able to slowly get back into it, Notre Could have been a heck of a lot worse for Notre Dame than it ended up being. Well, I think anybody that watched that game, Notre Dame got close, but when they did, Arizona State they pulled it back together and they pulled away. Yep. And it really was. It didn't take a great effort on Arizona State's part. It was just like you said, they'd gotten out of sync because they're just not built
to get a lead and then sit on it. They don't play that way. You can't play that way with that offense. But then again, if you just keep going out and scoring, then everybody's going to be like, well, you're just running out the score on Notre Dame, blah, blah, blah. But
I'd run out the score on Notre Dame.
Sure, so would I, but that's us. But again, a lot like the Ohio State-Michigan State game, this game was never as close as the score would indicate it was, is the way I feel about it. I think Arizona State dominated, other than that stretch Notre Dame had for a while there. But I was never concerned that Arizona State was going to lose this game, is the way I would put it.
Yeah. Arizona State, despite me, these criticisms of their second half play, they are still 22-0 under Todd Graham when leading at halftime. So that's
not bad. Not bad.
Yep. Moving on to the number 11 team in the country, which was Ole Miss. I mean, they had a tough one this week, Greg. Presbyterian coming into town.
Yeah.
And, when these two teams meet, you just throw the records out the window. Yeah, mostly you throw Presbyterians out the window because they're awful, or they're just not as good as Ole Miss. 48-0 for the Rebels, and they're probably going to move right back into the top 10 because of everything that happened, and they're not completely out of it yet either.
No, they're not. But I don't know how much stock you put in a win over Presbyterian.
Yeah,
come on.
Yeah,
so we'll see. I mean, they will move up by virtue of teams in front of them losing, but I don't think that they warrant being moved up because of this win. I'll say that.
No. Baylor puts another notch in their belt, and maybe this will help them move up a little bit higher because it is against another ranked team. 48-14 at number 15 Oklahoma, and this is the type of win that Baylor probably needed to really kind of force themselves back into that picture.
Yep.
Because as we talked about, all the thing knocks against them, but this hopefully because we see that the committee really loves those ranked team wins, and maybe that just gives them a little extra oomph to get them back into a real playoff conversation.
Well, they went into Oklahoma and just steamrolled them, so that's pretty impressive. And I'm really going to be curious to see how they work this committee, because this Baylor TCU thing is, I think, the biggest issue I have with it right now. But yeah, Baylor made a real statement, and they're going to have to move up after this, I think.
Well, because okay, so now that we're out to I think the rest of these teams aren't of any consequence after Baylor.
No.
So Auburn loses.
I will say this: Nebraska.
Oh Jesus!
I'm just talking. I don't think they're good enough. I don't think they would deserve it. But Nebraska is in a position, if everything falls their way, where they could be the Ohio State of this conversation. But that's a ways down the road yet. But yeah, Nebraska, believe it or not, is still hanging in there.
Yeah. I know, because I was trying to make my top 10, and I dropped Auburn out of the top 10, but then I had to kind of reconsider it. Well, it's like, they're still a really good team, and, do they drop all the way out? Does that mean Nebraska has to be the number 10 team in the country? Do I really feel okay with that? But looking at it, so Auburn loses. That's one team out of the top 10. Kansas State loses, Michigan State loses, and Notre Dame loses. 4 top 10 teams all lose. So that means you get a bunch of teams to move up. So you're probably going to have your top 4 is probably going to be Mississippi State, Florida State, Oregon, Alabama, right?
Right. I think so, yeah. Unless TCU shocks the world and moves into that number 4 spot, which wouldn't surprise me that much.
Right. Because of the way that the committee has done the rankings, that wouldn't surprise me either. Because TCU had a big win against Kansas State, whereas Alabama had a overtime win against number 16 LSU. So maybe they say, flip them. But either way, that's them. TCU probably is 5 or 4 right there. Arizona State probably moves up to 6. You move Ohio State up to 7 or 8.
Let's see.
I think you might have to move Baylor to 7.
You got to put
Ohio
Baylor
State to 8.
I would say Ohio State probably 8. Maybe if 8 would be as high as they could expect to get. I wouldn't be surprised to see them fall in the 9, 10, 11 range either, though.
Yeah, but I mean they're the number 14. They beat the number 8 team, and because they get the teams that lose in front of them. And I think
if you move them up 4 spots, go ahead. What?
Ohio State is now leading the Big Ten essentially,
right?
And they put stock into that, so they're probably going to jump over Ole Miss. Baylor. I think you have to move Baylor up as close to TCU as you possibly can.
Right.
So to give them some breathing room, TCU at 5, say, and Arizona State would be at 6. So I think Baylor at 7 is fine. And
then maybe Ohio State at 8.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best thing. And then you probably put Ole Miss and Auburn 9-10.
I don't know. I mean, you still got
unless you want to throw Nebraska ahead of either of those two.
Right. You've got Nebraska sitting there at 8-1. And I part of me thinks that the committee is kind of looking at it and going, okay, even though Nebraska's 8-1, they're not, because I mean, look, they're doing the same thing with Duke. Duke's 7-1, but they're not giving them any real play.
Right.
So
Nebraska's, like we said all year, Nebraska's signature win was a 5-point loss on the road, and that team now lost.
Right.
But Nebraska does play at number 25 Wisconsin this week.
Right.
So, and Wisconsin won, and I'm sure Wisconsin's going to move up a few spots here in tonight's rankings.
Well,
so maybe that gives them a better win if they can pull it off. But
Nebraska still got Wisconsin and a team that no one's really talking about, and they're not a playoff contender or anything, but a pretty good Minnesota team is still sitting out there. Ohio State has them this weekend, and then Nebraska still has to play both Minnesota and Wisconsin. So I don't know. I think that I think if it's me, I put Ohio State ahead of Nebraska just because Nebraska, like you said, their signature win is a 3-point loss.
Yeah.
So Mississippi State, Florida State, Oregon, Alabama, or TCU, and then we got Arizona State in there. I just don't see Nebraska jumping in, but nothing would surprise me at this point. Baylor, it's going to be the rankings are going to really be mixed up from what we saw last week this week, and they'll probably get mixed up again before it's all said and done.
We'll run down the rest of the ranked teams real quick, even though they're probably not, of any consequence.
Relevant. I guess so. There is some argument to be made that not all of the regular season is meaningful anymore. But
you still got your some of these teams are still in play for conference championships, and they could throw a wrench into things. Namely, teams like UCLA with a 44-30 win over Washington. UCLA sets the UCLA passing touchdown record in the victory. So good for you, Brett Hundley.
Remember back when they were like number 3, and we were laughing at them, saying "There's no way." We are not so good at the football at the NFL predictions, but we're pretty damn good with the college stuff.
Yeah,
everything's played out pretty much
at least big picture college stuff.
Right. Yeah, I mean we've pretty much nailed it coming down the road here, but yeah. So
Arizona with a really more tight than it should have been game against Colorado, but they pull it out 38-20. Colorado. Really not enjoying this move to the Pac-12. They've been awful in these first 3 years of Pac-12 play. Just the Buffs not having a good time.
They used to be a pretty respectable program.
Yeah,
and they've just become terrible now. It's just sad.
They're a doormat, that's for sure. So Arizona, UCLA, they're still alive there in the Pac-12 South. They got to hope that ASU slips up to somewhere. Maybe it's to Arizona in that last game, and then one of those two would get a shot at Oregon again. Because that's the other thing that's interesting to note. Arizona and UCLA both played Oregon already. Arizona State does not play Oregon in the regular season. So interesting little scheduling quirk there in the Pac-12. Because, if Arizona State plays Oregon in the regular season, maybe Arizona State has 2 losses and, then one of these other teams gets a shot. But who knows? That's just the way things work. A week after getting beat by their rivals in the world's biggest cocktail party, Georgia decided to take out their frustrations on poor little Kentucky. 63-31 in Lexington. Pretty big win there for the Bulldogs, and they get, despite this big win, they get a little reinforcements as Todd Gurley comes back this week.
Oh, good. Yeah. Good for them. Georgia's going to play a role in the SEC before this is all said and done.
They're probably going to be the winner of the SEC East unless something stupid happens and Missouri ends up in the title game again.
And Georgia's they've still got a shot at Auburn, which and that doesn't mean as much now, but it would have. But Georgia, they could still mess things up. I mean, what if they win the SEC? Then what do we do?
If Georgia wins the SEC, they're not in the playoff.
No, I don't think so either. No. But how do you keep the SEC out of the first playoff? We'll worry about that in a few weeks. Yeah, that's true.
If that so happens that's the case, then sorry SEC, you don't deserve a shot because you didn't. It's great that you're the best conference in college football and you beat up on each other every week, but if you cannibalize yourself like that, then you're stuck. That's the one thing with all these teams in the SEC West. Yeah, it's amazing that you have such talent over there. But if they cannibalize themselves and they all end up with 2 losses,
right?
Then you're in a rough spot. You're barely getting one team in there at that point.
Well, let's look at it just for a second here. Let's say that Mississippi State runs the table, makes it to the SEC title game, and Georgia beats them. Does Mississippi State not make the playoff at 11-1 or 12-1 or whatever they would be? See, that's what I mean.
It depends on where Georgia ends up in the rankings.
But that's my thing, though. I mean, there's so many crazy things that could happen.
You couldn't because they told us time and again they're putting a lot of emphasis on conference championships.
Right, but to take that a step further, let's say that Mississippi State goes all the way, loses in the SEC title game, and Ohio State takes their place in the playoff. I don't know. I don't think that's fair though, because I don't think Ohio State's better than Mississippi State.
No, but they won something.
No, that's true. It's going to be fun. It's just I can't believe for all the years that I was against the idea of a college football playoff, because I don't know if I've enjoyed any college football season as much as I've enjoyed this one so far. Yeah. It's just a blast.
It's been fun.
But there's a lot of things that are still going to happen. It's going to be something.
Our Duke Blue Devils still 8-1, 27-10 win over Syracuse.
Getting no respect. No respect.
No respect. I mean, they're just chugging along. Duke's on track for another 10-win season.
Who do they have left? They've
2 consecutive 10-win seasons for Duke.
That
would be something, wouldn't it?
It really would. I mean,
they've got Virginia Tech, North Carolina, Wake Forest.
Right. So
they're winning 10 games.
I think it was inconceivable last year for Duke to knock off Florida State in the ACC title game. I don't think it's as big of a stretch this year as it was last year. I'm not saying it's going to happen.
Florida State's look very beatable.
Exactly.
And Duke, I mean, nobody's talking about them, but they put up some – I mean, the teams they're playing aren't great, but they're still putting up pretty good wins against some of these teams. Yeah, they had a 2-overtime game against Pitt. But besides that, they're winning all these games by a decent enough margin that it wouldn't be crazy if, at the very least, made a game of it against Florida State.
Well, they've got one win against a ranked team, which is number 22, Georgia Tech. But, again, I'm not saying they're going to beat Florida State or that there's a good chance they will. I'm just saying that last year there was really no hope of it happening. This year it wouldn't be the biggest upset I've ever seen if they pulled it off. That's the way I look at it. And I think it would be awesome if they did just that.
It would be fun for sure. But it's just dreams for now.
Yeah.
A surprising one with West Virginia losing 33-16 to Texas.
Yeah.
We thought West Virginia had been pretty good. I mean, they've given a lot of teams some trouble. They beat Baylor. They were a decent football team, and then they lose to a bad football team.
I don't get this team. They only lost by 1 to TCU.
Yep.
They had the Baylor win. They played Oklahoma fairly tough. Played Alabama fairly tough at the beginning of the season.
Yeah.
And then you go out and you lose to Texas.
Yeah.
I don't.
Well, and now Texas has an interesting question. Because they're 5-5, you have to at least have 6 wins to be bowl eligible. They have 2 games left at Oklahoma State and at home against number 6 TCU. Does Texas get bowl eligible this season?
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
I think Oklahoma State. They're at Oklahoma State.
They're at Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State also needs a win to be bowl eligible. They're 5-4.
I like Oklahoma State in that, and I think TCU, they're in sniffing range of the playoff. They're not going to let up against Texas.
Yeah,
Texas
does have 2 weeks to prepare for TCU.
Yeah, well, I think the Longhorns are going to be on the outside looking in this year.
Yeah, well, not a bad thing.
Not at all.
Georgia Tech, a quietly good team there in the ACC as well. 56-23 over NC State. They're 8-2. And Wisconsin wipes the floor of Purdue because Purdue's a terrible football team.
Oh, my God, are they ever.
Yep. But that was last week. Let's look ahead to the upcoming week in college football as, again, you have some really good games here. Some interesting little nuggets.
We've got some possible elimination games. They would have to be upsets, but we do have some possibilities.
But for sure, I think for sure an elimination game. Number 1, Mississippi State. Number 5, Alabama in Tuscaloosa.
Yep.
Easily Mississippi State's toughest test so far this season. And Alabama's still looking to if Alabama wins out, they're probably going to be the number 1 team in the country at the end of it, too.
More than likely, yeah.
Alabama opens as a 7.5-point favorite, by the way, if you're curious.
This is Mississippi State's chance to show that they're legit. If they can beat Alabama in Alabama, then, yeah, there's no arguing against them being number 1. But what do you think? Do you think they can go into Tuscaloosa and beat the Tide there?
I think they can. But this is going to be a really tough game. It's also an interesting kind of combination of Mississippi State coming off, the easy game against, University of Tennessee Martin versus Alabama coming off a night game in LSU in overtime, a tough drag 'em out game. How does that play into this game and how they kind of come at each other? If one's a little bit more energized, or if they've been too lackadaisical, if the other one's a little too tired or mentally broken from just the rigors of the SEC schedule. It's an interesting one.
Well, the way I look at it is Mississippi State comes off. Who they play? Tennessee Martin.
Tennessee Martin.
They're going to get into this Alabama game and go, wow, yeah, we remember how tough football is now because last week it was a cakewalk, and all of a sudden you're going to have a team that's not Mississippi or Tennessee Martin. I don't know. If the Tide wins this, it really throws a wrench into things. If Mississippi State wins, it kind of clears up the picture a little bit. But I think I got to go with the Alabama in this one. I think that they're at home. It's just going to be tough for Mississippi State to go in there and win.
I want to pick Mississippi State just for the fact of making this whole thing a little bit easier.
Right.
And because I think it would be funny if Mississippi State, of all teams, in the first year of the playoff was the SEC representative.
That would be something.
And it's not Alabama or LSU or Georgia or Florida or anybody like that. It's Mississippi State. But again, I also like chaos, so I'd love to see a four-way tie in the SEC West,
right,
if not just for fun.
I'm looking at Mississippi State's schedule here, and they beat LSU, they beat Texas A&M back when A&M was number 6, but that run's not as impressive now. They beat Auburn, but I don't know. It's going to be. I know that I'll be glued to the television. I can tell you that I'll be watching it. But I got to go with the Tide just because they're at home. I'm going to give them the home field advantage in this and say that they probably win, and then we get more chaos because then it's going to really be crazy to figure out who's going to do what.
Yep. Florida State, number 2, playing at Miami. Florida State only a 1-point favorite in this game, and Miami, they did beat Duke earlier in the year, so that's a big win for the.
Is that where the Blue Devils lost? Is that who they lost to? Was Miami? Wow.
So this is always a rivalry game.
Yep.
It's in Miami. Florida State hasn't been the most impressive team. I think this is a definite upset watch. If this thing is close for too long, Florida State might have to sweat it out a little bit in Miami.
Well, you've got Vegas, obviously, with Florida State only being a 1-point favorite. They don't like what they see with the Seminoles either.
Yep.
Because if they really were the number 2 team in the country playing, what is Miami 6-3, something like that?
6-3. Yep.
Yeah, you got to think that there's the point spread's much bigger, but Vegas sees the same thing we see. They see a team that's probably not as good as their ranking. I put this one on upset watch. I'm not going to call it an upset, but I wouldn't be a bit surprised to see the Hurricanes pull it out. And what else does Miami have to play for this year besides beating Florida State? Yeah.
Exactly. And I think if Duke slips up, I think Miami would end up in the ACC title game, and then get a second shot at Florida State. So they have a little bit to play for, I guess. But it's going to be I think that one is going to be a sneaky game that people should keep their eye on. Number 3, Auburn, or at least number 3 right now. They won't be in a little bit. But they go to Georgia. Now, this is interesting because we talked about maybe the 5-way tie. If Auburn loses to Georgia, then the 5-way tie is out of the question.
Right.
But if Georgia beats Auburn, then Georgia probably vaults themselves a little bit higher up the rankings, and then maybe they keep winning, and then maybe they go to the SEC title game, and maybe they knock off the SEC West winner. I don't know. I mean, this is an interesting game. As in terms of like a backdoor type of game to maybe throw Georgia into a conversation they haven't been in all year.
Well, you really do. It's a real distinct possibility because if they can hang with 2 losses and you get to a point where, let's say Alabama loses again and they've got 2 losses, and let's say that like Mississippi State drops this one and they lose to Ole Miss, all of a sudden you've got a bunch of SEC teams with 2 losses. Let's say that Ohio State trips up against Minnesota but still wins the Big Ten. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden you're looking at, Oregon. Let's say Oregon loses to Arizona State. All of a sudden we've got Georgia. If enough things happen, they could conceivably be a playoff team if they win the SEC. It's just nuts.
Well, because they had this game against Auburn, and they still finish up the year with a ranked Georgia Tech team because Georgia Tech's probably still going to be ranked at some point. So, and then they would have to play the SEC title game against, a highly ranked team.
Right.
They could just come around to the back end of this thing. And, again, as we talked about, if the committee really does value that conference championship, maybe they get that extra push to say, well, you won the best conference in the country, so now we're going to put you in the playoff.
Yeah, and there's a real possibility that a lot of these teams with one loss right now could end up with two. And you might end up with, I mean, if Florida State, if they run the table, then they're going to move to number one. But then you're going to have a bunch of teams with two losses and a couple one-loss teams in there. And that's when it comes down to, I guess, where the conference championship really matters that much. If you've got, let's say that it's between Georgia, 2 losses, and Ohio State with 2 losses. Who do you pick? You got to go with Georgia, don't you?
I guess so.
Yeah, it's going to be.
You have to.
It's going to be really. This is things far from set yet, and that's what's cool about it. It's just going to get crazier as we go.
Yeah. TCU probably going to have a walk there in Kansas.
Yeah.
Arizona State going to go to Oregon State, and that's not ever an easy place to play, but Oregon State's not very good this year.
No.
It should be an easy win there.
Should be, but I have that one circled too as one to keep an eye on just because you just don't know. Oregon State could put something together, but Arizona State maybe comes down off of the big win over Notre Dame. They're a little, you know what I mean? It could happen.
Yeah. Nebraska, Wisconsin. An elimination game in the Big Ten West.
Yeah. How did that happen?
Yeah.
But, if Nebraska,
I hate watching that. Of all the games in the country, this is one of my least favorite to aesthetically watch.
Yeah, because they look
the same.
Look exactly alike. Yeah, I'm sure Nebraska will break out one of their nutty uniforms for this one. And
well, it's in Wisconsin, so maybe Wisconsin wears the red helmets to separate themselves.
Right. Another one I'm keeping my eye on is Ohio State, Minnesota. That Minnesota team's not a bad team.
No, 7-2, 4-1 in the Big Ten. They've given a lot of teams fits this year.
And they are playing this one in Minnesota. And you got the Buckeyes coming in off of a big one off Michigan State. Maybe they come in a little flat-footed. And Minnesota would love nothing more than to knock the Buckeyes right back down off the perch. So still could see some elimination games this weekend outside of Mississippi State, Alabama.
And an ACC elimination game, Clemson, Georgia Tech.
Oh, how I would love it if my Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets and their crazy triple option offense managed to climb their way all the way up into the playoff talk. That would be something. Not going to happen, but boy, that would be cool.
And, of course, Duke, they take on Virginia Tech in their quest for back-to-back 10-win season.
The Blue Devils continue their quest for the national championship.
And no, that's not Coach K we're talking about either. That's your college football weekend. We eagerly await the rankings tonight. Of course, we'll talk about those on Thursday with basically a sports show. A lot of interesting things still going to play out, and still plenty of football left to play. We'll move on to the National Football League, and we'll start on Thursday. And Greg... This was a good football weekend for you, and it started early with a thumping of the Bengals by your Cleveland Browns, 24-3. And now the Cleveland Browns are first place in the AFC North, or in any division, whether it was the AFC North or Central, for the first time in 19 years.
I don't even know what to say about that game. Of all the things I expected to happen on Thursday night, that wasn't any of them. A 24-3 win. They dominated the Bengals. And I don't know. Are the Browns really this much better than they used to be, or are the Bengals as bad as we think they are? Because I really don't know what to make of this.
I don't know what to make of that whole stupid division now. Because of what Pittsburgh did on Sunday and where Baltimore is. And this whole division's stupid.
I mean,
it's a stupid division.
It was like last week, okay, the Browns can be in first place if Pittsburgh loses to the Jets. But we're like, that's not going to happen. So, yeah, okay.
And don't have to worry about that.
Right. And then the Steelers looked terrible against the Jets. It was unbelievable. But, the Browns in first place. I don't even know what to make of it.
Browns in first place. But did you hear what Jeremy Hill, rookie running back for the Bengals, said?
I sure did, yeah.
Asked whether the Browns were better than they previously thought, Hill said, "Oh, no, not at all. They're probably worse than I thought, to be honest with you." So you say that after you lost by 21 points to a team. I don't know why you do that.
How do you justify that? I mean, what's your reasoning?
Is that argument? Is that you're trying to say that you guys are really terrible? Because that's true. Andy Dalton, by the way, 10 for 33, 86 yards passing.
Didn't he have a quarterback rating of 2 or something like that?
Something like that. And Jeremy Hill, the guy who just spouted his mouth off about the Browns aren't that good, 12 rushes, 55 yards.
Okay, well, that's over 4 a carry. That's not bad. But I don't know what to make of this Bengals team. I mean, I'm glad the Browns won, and they dominated, and they looked great doing it. The defense played spectacularly well. But then again, was the defense that great, or is Andy Dalton just that terrible? I don't know.
And it's just funny because, I mean, we talked about it before, but they were 3-0, and they were the darlings of the NFL, and they hadn't even turned over the ball yet.
Yeah.
Now they're pretty bad.
Yeah, I mean, the first 3 weeks of the season, we're like, hey, maybe this is the year they're finally going to do it. They were looking like the best team in the AFC, short of the Broncos. Now they're not even the best team in the AFC North. Yeah,
and again, if too bad the Browns lost that game to Jacksonville, but looking ahead, I mean, Houston, not great. Atlanta, bad. Right. Buffalo, beatable. Indianapolis, they probably lose. Cincinnati, beatable. Carolina, beatable. Baltimore, beatable. I don't know. Maybe your Cleveland Browns might just be a playoff team.
Oh, my God.
I don't know.
Stop the presses. We're in an alternate timeline.
That would be a crazy sight. I mean, we just had the Kansas City Royals make the freaking World Series. I don't know if I could deal with the Cleveland Browns making it to the playoffs or the Super Bowl, God's sakes.
I don't see them making the Super Bowl. I'm not even sure they make the playoffs because they're still the Cleveland Browns.
That's true.
They're still the team that will go out and dominate a Steelers team and turn around the next week and lose to Jacksonville. So, but, and I will give our longtime listener Charles credit for this. He brought up, we always talk about if the Browns hadn't lost to Jacksonville, what about the Steelers team? If they hadn't lost to the Jets and to the Buccaneers, where would they be at this point?
Yeah. No, the AFC North is full of some of the dumbest losses that we've seen this season.
Some of the nicest wins. I mean, it's really surprising, nice wins.
Great wins, yeah.
And then some of just the most idiotic losses you could imagine. It's just, I don't know.
Let's move on to Sunday, though. We'll start in Buffalo as the Kansas City Chiefs and Buffalo Bills fighting for playoff position. Buffalo was actually the better team for the majority of this game. They were up, 13-3 going into the fourth quarter. But the Chiefs, 14 points in the fourth quarter to stage a late comeback in Buffalo and knock off the Bills. And the Chiefs, 6-3, still chugging along, right on pace with everybody else.
Do you think that, to borrow a term from Bill Simmons, do you think the Chiefs are the sneaky good team this year?
Yeah, well, because it's something that he mentioned too, and now when he said it, I was like, that's kind of true. Because they lost that opening week game to Tennessee. And at that point, everyone had expected the Chiefs to regress, and then you see them lose that first game like they did. It's like, oh, all right, that's who the Chiefs are. We knew they're going to regress. See you later, Chiefs. And then, so you forget about them. But then, the Broncos are surging, and the Chargers are surging, so you put all your attention on them. And slowly but surely, the Chargers start to fall down. Chiefs put some wins together, and all of a sudden they're 6-3. They're second place in the division, and they're right in the thick of the wild card race.
Yeah,
I think if the season ended today, they would be the first wild card, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, they would. They would indeed. Yeah, it's they're interesting. It's like you said. I mean, it's exactly what you said. Is that they came out. Everybody talked about them regressing. As we talked about it last year, they had a really soft schedule, and they were able to kind of make hay out of that. But they're playing pretty good football. I mean, they're pesky good. They're not an easy out for anybody, and they're a game behind the Broncos for first place in that division at this point. Unbelievable.
Yep, they're 3-2 on the road, so they're playing good everywhere. So good for the Chiefs. Not so good. And this was another game where another one where you're either going up or you're going down in terms of the rest of your season, as the Dolphins went to Detroit. And this was a tight game throughout, but the Lions able to get 10 points there in the fourth quarter, make a late rally to get the 20-16 victory over the Dolphins. Lions are 7-2. Dolphins fall down to 5-4. I think weren't the Lions were 7-2 last year, right? Were they 7-2 or 7-3?
I think it might have been 7-3.
Either way, they're basically right where they were last year. So this is a tipping point for Detroit. Do they keep going? Are they going to be able to keep pace with the Packers and beat them out? Because the Packers are looking really good right now.
Yeah.
And Detroit has a game up on them, but if they slip a little bit and the Packers keep surging, then this thing could flip pretty quickly for them too.
Well, I'm looking at Detroit's schedule right now, and they've got 7 wins, but really the only what I would call, I guess, quality win, to borrow a term from college football, I think is against Green Bay.
That was a terrible game by the Packers too.
Yeah, and they had a tough time with the Jets. They had a hell of a time with Buffalo. I think they won that one. Oh, they lost to Buffalo.
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't know what to make of the Lions.
Who's bad now. They lost to Carolina, who's pretty bad now.
Right. I mean, so they're 7-2, but they're kind of like the Chiefs were last year. It's a 7-2 that you look at and go, yeah, but it's not a good 7-2.
But you look at their schedule. They have to play at Arizona this week, who is now without Carson Palmer. So that might be an easier game than it was before. Then they play at New England, which is going to be a hard game. But outside of that, Chicago, Tampa, Minnesota, Chicago.
They have Green Bay
one
more time.
At Green Bay at the very last game of the year, and that's if both these teams keep going, that could be for the division title. But the Lions have some easy games that they can just rack up here as long as they play up to snuff and they don't kind of lose their head.
I guess the thing I look at that stands out to me the most about the Lions is of that division. We're just talking in the NFC North. Second least points scored behind the Vikings.
Yep.
The Bears have more points. But they've also given up the fewest points. So
right, they have one of the best defenses in the league, third in passing yards against, second in rushing yards
against.
Right,
so you look at them, and the first thing you think of with the Lions normally is, okay, you've got Stafford, you've got Calvin Johnson, you've got an explosive offense, but they're winning it with defense this year. And that's something that I don't think defense slumps like offense does. So I don't know. Maybe they're not a mirage. Yeah. Maybe they are this good.
No, that's one of those things. One of the things that I always remember some of these broadcasters would reiterate when we got into like the colder weather, defense and running game. Those are two things that travel. You could take those anywhere and they're good anywhere.
Right.
Sort of thing. So hopefully that works for them because I like to see the Lions do well. They had that kind of up kick when they first got Matthew Stafford and Jim Schwartz, and they got to the playoffs, and it was the resurgence of the Lions, and then they went right back down to the gutter where they were before.
Yeah, so. But they're 7-2, and they're in a good spot. I mean, they've got easy games. The only tough game they have? Well, they've got they got three tough games left. They got the Cardinals, Patriots,
New England, and Packers. Yeah.
So they've got 7 games left, and 3 of them are tough. I mean, I can see them winning 10, 11 games. Sure. That should be good enough for the playoffs in the NFC.
We'll move on to, speaking of more NFC powerhouses. Across the pond, the Dallas Cowboys went on the road to take on the Jacksonville Jaguars at their new home in Wembley Stadium. And Tony Romo, it was questionable whether or not he was going to play. It was the long flight over. That was going to be bad for his back. He shouldn't have flown in the first place. But he goes out and plays well, 27, 246, and 3 touchdowns against the Jacksonville Jaguars. DeMarco Murray, another 100-yard rushing game, exactly 100 yards. And the Cowboys are 7-3, and this was, because they lost last week. Some people were talking about, Tony Romo doesn't play, and they end up losing to Jacksonville. They're going to be 6-4, and oh my God, the Cowboys are going to collapse. But they go out and win this game, and they're still right at the top of the NFC East heap, and maybe they felt they needed to play Tony Romo because now with Nick Foles out in Philadelphia, maybe they have the chance to kind of get the jump on the Eagles and make some sort of separation.
I don't know. Mark Sanchez looked pretty good last night.
He did, but Carolina's pretty bad now.
Yeah, they are. But we talked about it last week that they were really rolling the dice with playing Tony Romo in this game, and they did, and they won, and that's great. Now they go into a bye week, I think.
Yeah.
So it kind of worked out for them, I suppose, but. Yeah, I got to, I don't think it was probably the wisest choice to play Tony Romo, but then I look at my alternative, which is Brandon Weeden. And yeah. I think I'm in a tough division that I want to win, so maybe it wasn't the dumbest thing in the world, but he came out of it okay. He gets 2 weeks off now, so he can heal up, and the Cowboys stay right in the thick of it.
Yeah. Yeah, good for the Cowboys. I don't have much else to say because Jacksonville's terrible, and the Cowboys should have won this game one way or the other. And it was
right. But we do still have the chance of Tony Romo throwing the season-ending interception, so that's still in play at this point.
Still very much in play, yes. We'll move down to New Orleans, and this was an interesting game.
Very.
The 49ers needed to win this game to stay within any sort of relevant shot at the playoffs. And the Saints, they're undefeated at home. What was going to break here? And it was a tight game throughout, back and forth. And it goes into overtime, of all things, I believe it was a strip sack of Drew Brees, sets up the 49er field goal, and they win it. The Saints' first home loss in a little while with a 27-24 victory. So the 49ers are 5-4, and they're still in it. And the Saints are 4-5 and still leading their division.
Well, are we going to see a reverse of what we saw a few years ago, where the Saints are going to go 7-9 this time and play the Seahawks? And
No. Yeah, because
it's possible.
that's the way it would work out right now, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. How about that? Well, it'd either be Seattle or Green Bay that would play.
Oh yeah.
Or Dallas.
But we could see it, but yeah, I don't think. I mean, I don't think that 500. I don't think they're going to make 500 because they lost a home game, and that's what they needed to go 500 was to win a home. Have all 8 wins at home. Now that's out the window. Now they have to win one on the road just to have a realistic shot of finishing 500.
Yeah, they play Cincinnati, Baltimore, then they're at Pittsburgh, at Chicago, at Tampa. So they should be okay.
What a horrible division that is, though. My God.
It really is. That's just...
What did we see in the Saints that we thought they would make the Super Bowl this year?
I don't know, Drew Brees.
I guess, yeah.
That home record that we thought was, untouchable.
Well, yeah, a lot of people saying the 49ers saved their season. I have to agree.
They saved their season for now. I mean, they're 5-4.
Right.
They're a game behind Seattle and Green Bay for the wild cards right now. But the problem is, with Philadelphia and Dallas both having 7 wins right now, the 49ers are the second team on the outside looking in. Because you have Dallas would be slated for a wild card right now, and then Green Bay or Seattle slated for the second one. So San Francisco is actually behind another team in terms of the wild card race.
Right.
And Philadelphia might slide because with Mark Sanchez, but they played well last night. Dallas is still going to be pretty good. Green Bay is not going to slow down anytime soon. Seattle still has a lot to prove. And now that there's issues with Arizona at the quarterback position, Seattle sees, well, maybe we can still win the division sort of thing.
Yeah, the 49ers...
they're still at the back of a very large pack of competitive teams in the NFC.
They are, and like the Seahawks right now would take the second wild card over the Packers because of the head-to-head matchup. But, yeah, so they're behind. Yeah. They're behind Seattle. They're behind Green Bay. They're behind Dallas or Philadelphia, depending on who comes out of that. And they've still got a tough road ahead of them. But if they lose this game, I think it's over for them.
Yeah, if they had lost this game, then it's goodbye, good night. Jim Harbaugh's filling out his application for the Michigan head coaching job.
Right.
He still might be if they don't make the playoffs.
I'm starting to hear things that they don't, that they're tired of him out there. And I think we talked about this maybe the first season that Harbaugh's act might get old as a team got older. That it would be tougher, and maybe we're starting to see that play out now.
Yeah, well, I mean, wasn't he nearly traded to the Browns in the offseason?
Yeah, that was nutty, but yeah.
Could you imagine if the Browns had Jim Harbaugh?
Mike
maybe they're a little bit better.
Mike Pettin's doing a pretty good job. I'm surprised.
Pettin Zoo, alive and well.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, so the 49ers, they stay alive, and the Saints, they're alive because that division's awful. They're probably going to win it. If they win it at 6-10, I would not be surprised. It's stupid.
Yeah, I mean, we thought people lost their minds over a 7-9 team winning a division. Let a 6-10 team do it and watch what happens.
I don't know if 6-10's because let me pull up their schedule again. That would mean they only win 2 games, and they would lose to. Oh, what just happened? Oh, I don't know. They still have a lot of games against the division, and we know the division's terrible. I think they still have to play Tampa twice.
Right. I think 7-9, 8-8 is probably going to get it done in that division, and they might be able to get that home loss back on the road with a win. So
yeah, they might be able to get up to 9-7 if they're lucky. I think just based on having Drew Brees as the quarterback, they're still going to win a lot of these games if they can just simply outscore the other team.
Right.
But we'll move on. The Ravens had a 21-7 win over the Titans. They're still right there in the rest of that crap pile that is the AFC North. This crap pile that got a whole lot tighter because the Pittsburgh Steelers,
for Pete's sake,
Ben Roethlisberger throwing 12 touchdowns in 2 weeks, offensive juggernaut, they're the hottest team in football. They go on the road and they lose to the 2-8 Jets, 20-13.
Yeah,
17-0 after the first quarter, and the Steelers just never in it.
Jets dominated that game. I mean, it was unbelievable. I think the last thing you want to be in the NFL this year is the hot team, because this seems to be what's happening to the hot team. Is everybody starts talking about you. The next thing you know, you go out and fall flat on your face. But they did not look good in that game at all.
No, I mean, but what do we make of this whole stupid division now? Because we think the Steelers, they're coming back. They're on the road. They're gonna they're playing a bad team and they're going to be fine. They're probably going to start putting together some wins, and maybe they're the best team in the AFC North. And then they lose to the freaking Jets. Not only do they lose, they lost to the Buccaneers earlier this year.
Right.
They have those big blowout wins over Indianapolis and Baltimore, and then they have these two clunkers against the Jets and the freaking Buccaneers. What do you make of Pittsburgh? I
don't know. I mean, I guess it depends on which team shows up. The team that beat Indianapolis and beat the Ravens looks pretty darn good. But they're also the same team, same exact team that lost to Tampa Bay and to the Jets. So it's this division's crazy. I guess at the end of all of it, who has the best defense? And that looks like it's probably going to be either Baltimore or Cleveland. But I don't see neither one of those teams has enough offense, I think, to really to I don't know. I'm beginning to think 9-7 probably takes this division, and it's just.
Well, I don't know because 6-3 is the top right now, so that means that they're got to go under 500 down the stretch.
3-4 for the Browns down the stretch. That's not an unreasonable thing to think at all.
Yeah, but I don't know if that's division winner type thing because the Bengals have talent. They could string together some wins here. The Steelers, we saw them just blow out a couple teams, and maybe they could recover from this. I don't know. It's
up in the air. I will say this, that of the four teams right now, I like the Browns' chances the least. I do, because you've got the Houston game. There are games out there that you look at and you go, they should win, but we thought the same thing with Jacksonville. Houston's a much better team than Jacksonville. It's a long way to go yet in that division.
Yeah.
But it's funny. Every team's over 500 and it gets no respect, that division, because people just know that despite their winning records, none of those teams are that good.
Yeah. Speaking of teams that aren't that good, the Falcons beat the Buccaneers. Did anybody watch this game? Did this even happen? If a tree falls in the woods and no one's around to see it?
I saw highlights, so I guess that counts.
Okay. Well, 27-17 win for the Falcons.
Highlights, such as it is, I suppose. That's what you have to call them, I guess.
By the way, the Buccaneers are 1-8. Again, that one win against the Steelers on the road.
Right. In Pittsburgh.
Yep. Again, speaking of bad teams, the Raiders continue their march to probably winless. I still don't see where the Raiders pick up a game, but they lose 41-17 to the Broncos. Peyton Manning, 5 touchdown passes. Just kind of what he does.
The Raiders, they're past the point where they're going to accidentally win a game now. Now you're looking at it, you're going, they're going to go 0-16.
I mean,
they're just terrible.
I think their only shots are at San Diego this week, or at St. Louis in 2 weeks.
Yeah, but St. Louis, as they're the best 3-6 team you're going to run across.
Right, I know.
They play tough.
There's no way the Raiders win any of these games.
I don't think so.
Because even their home games are Kansas City, San Francisco, and Buffalo.
Oh,
maybe they beat Buffalo in the second to last game of the year because they got to rally together, and we're not going to go winless.
It all depends on if Buffalo's still in the hunt for a playoff spot. Probably not. But if Buffalo's out of it, they've got a shot at beating Buffalo probably. But look at their point differential, minus 106.
Yeah. They're pretty bad.
I mean, have you seen these guys? It's like you look at them and you go, I don't know how they could win a game. They've got nothing.
They really don't have a thing. And I feel bad for Charles Woodson playing on that team because he gave the whole handshake thing to Peyton Manning after the game, and it was just kind of like you see the look on Peyton's face, like, I'm sorry, man. Yeah, well, you should be somewhere else. I think stayed in Green Bay.
I think Woodson's got a Super Bowl ring with the Packers, so his career wasn't completely for naught, But what a way to finish.
Spent all those years on terrible Oakland teams. So.
Yeah, what a way for a great career to end, or come to an end anyway.
Yep. We'll move on to the Rams and the Cardinals. This was tight early. The Rams were making this thing really close. It was 14-10 at halftime, and the Cardinals able to get 21 points in the fourth quarter, but not with Carson Palmer.
Nope.
Who tore his ACL. It wasn't even a contact injury. He just kind of – it's similar to what happened to him against not entirely similar to how he tore his ACL against the Steelers, but a mere 2 days after he signs a 3-year extension, which I thought was ridiculous in the first place because I didn't think there's no way he plays 3 more years. There's no way he plays 3 more years after this. Does he even bother rehabbing and coming back?
They're talking
torn ACLs.
What I heard yesterday was that they're talking that he could be ready to play by training camp of next year.
But why?
Well, I guess if you're the Cardinals, from what I understand, 2 years of those 3 are on the books, guaranteed. So you're going to want to get something out of your investment. But, yeah, it's just that contract hadn't even been folded up and put in the safe yet, and he was already injured.
Yeah.
It's just unbelievable. And I don't know how much does this hurt the Cardinals. I mean, Drew Stanton's shown he's a pretty capable backup, but this is a team with the best record in the NFL, and they just lost their starting quarterback. That's got to have some sort of effect, doesn't it?
Matt Flynn was a capable backup until he had to be a starter.
Right.
Kirk Cousins was a capable backup until he had to be a starter.
Oh, yeah. Kirk Cousins is the poster boy for that stuff.
All right. So it depends on if it's one of those things where the more you see him, the more you figure out his flaws. But I think Bruce Arians, as the head coach, has done a really good job at kind of guiding this Cardinals team, and I think they're going to be okay. The defense has been playing great all season, and that's something that's, like we talked about with the Lions, that's something that's going to be able to carry them. And, I mean, we'll see when they play the Lions this week. If they can overcome this game against the Lions and still go for it. I mean, if they can get to 9-1, I think they're going to be just fine. I think they're probably going to end up winning the division at that point.
One thing they've got going for them is that they don't have an offense like, say, they don't have a high-flying offense. So
right.
It's not like, say, if the Saints lose Drew Brees, where they're totally screwed if that happens, or the Packers lose Aaron Rodgers.
Right.
Or, you know,
I mean, they're still middle of the pack when it comes to passing, and they're 29th in rushing yards.
Right.
So their offense wasn't ever what was carrying them, and it's like you said, it's not very prolific. But
that's what I mean. So I think Stanton can step in and manage that offense, and they're not going to drop off a whole lot because they weren't that great offensively to begin with.
Yeah, the thing that's worrisome for the Cardinals is they still have both games against Seattle left.
Right.
And without Carson Palmer, maybe that's tougher. And they still have to play at St. Louis, which St. Louis gave them a pretty good game in this game. So
the Rams can't beat anybody bad, but they are really good against good teams for some reason. I don't understand it, but that seems to be what they are.
To combat the injury to Carson Palmer, by the way, the Cardinals have announced they've re-signed Ryan Lindley.
Hey, okay. Who's he?
Well, he actually started a game for the Cardinals not too long ago.
Well, who didn't not too long ago?
Yeah, I think they had like 7 starting quarterbacks in a span of 2 years.
Yeah, where's John Skelton not available or something?
John Skelton, Max Hall.
Where's Max Hall?
Probably coaching a seminar at BYU or something like that.
It's too late to swing a trade for Derek Anderson with the Panthers, so can't do that.
Yeah, well,
we'll see. It's going to be again. Their offense is not prolific, like you said, so they're not going to see that big of a drop off because they aren't, like the Patriots or the Broncos in the first place. So that does benefit them, I suppose.
Yeah. We'll stay in the NFC West and we'll go up to Seattle. And the Giants were making a game of this thing early. It was 17-14 at halftime, and it was one of those things where is that Seattle aura, is that gone? Can people just go in there and not be afraid of playing the Seahawks in CenturyLink Field? But Seahawks shut out the Giants in the second half. 21 points in the fourth quarter. Marshawn Lynch with 4 touchdown runs on the day, and they end up beating the Giants handily, 38-17.
And the Seahawks quietly at 6-3 and kind of climbing back into things.
Yeah, and again, they still have 2 games against the Cardinals left, and if Drew Stanton isn't capable enough to really kind of keep the ship going straight for the Cardinals, then maybe Seattle's right back in the talk for winning the division.
Yeah.
I don't think that's crazy.
No, and didn't they set some sort of record for rushing for their team too yesterday or Sunday? They had 300 and some odd yards on the ground, I think is what I heard.
Let me see.
It was nutty, whatever it was. I mean, Lynch just went off, but yeah, it was.
Yeah, I don't know. I see Russell Wilson rush for 107 yards against the Giants, second most in his career. I know your favorite player.
Yeah, my boy Russell Wilson.
Yeah. Your boy Russell Muscle Wilson.
But yeah,
franchise record 350 yards on Sunday.
Yeah,
most by any team in a game since the Chiefs rushed for 352 in 2012.
Okay, but yeah, the Seahawks are not dead yet. I mean, they seem to have shown signs that they weren't going to be in it this year, but like I said, quietly right back at 6-3 and right back in the thick of the playoff hunt.
Yeah. And since I mentioned the Cardinals again, the other thing that I think is with Carson Palmer out, any sort of Super Bowl hopes I don't think that are gone.
Yeah, I don't know that Drew Stanton's going to take you to the Super Bowl.
I mean, he might be serviceable to win the division, get you to a playoff game, but I don't know what much you could do past that. I didn't even expect the Cardinals to maybe make that sort of run anyway, because it's really just about their defense, and like I said, they can't run the ball really well. Their passing game is just enough to get them over the hump. But I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how they recover this week against the Lions. And speaking of Lions and the NFC North, the Packers and Bears played a game last night. Well, I mean, the Packers did.
Yeah.
The Bears did.
I felt sorry for the Bears. I honestly did.
That was pretty bad.
It was just...
32 nothing at half, or 42 nothing at halftime.
42 nothing at halftime, yeah.
55-14 final score. Aaron Rodgers 6 touchdown passes
in the first half.
In the first half.
Like I told you before we started, I have Aaron Rodgers and Jordy Nelson on one of my fantasy teams, and by those two alone beat the other team I was playing. Everything else was just gravy after that. It was ugly. I mean, and they showed it on the game too. Jordy Nelson a couple times. I mean, there wasn't a receiver within 7 yards of him on a couple of those catches. That's how bad the Bears secondary was in that game that night. Horrible.
It was pretty bad, and some of the fans in Chicago are already burning Jay Cutler jerseys.
I don't know how much of this you can blame on Cutler. I mean, Cutler didn't give up 55 points.
No.
You know, this is a bad Bears team, but I started thinking about it. Mark Trestman used to be the offensive coordinator for the Browns, the original Browns.
Yeah.
And he took a pretty good offense and ruined it. And I don't know how the guy's managed to parlay his way into an NFL head coaching job, but
well, I mean, he was obviously a stud for the Montreal Alouettes.
Yeah, that's a whole different animal, though, you know?
Yeah.
But this Bears team, I mean, I thought they were a playoff team, but after Monday night or Sunday night, no way. There's just not a chance in the world now.
No, and I mean, we've always thought they were kind of an up and down team. We've seen, the emotions of our friend Andy kind of go up and down. But this whole thing is just
he didn't even really react too poorly to this.
Because what do you do? They've been bad all season, and then they just get dump trucked like this. Like, well, yeah. They're terrible. What do you want?
I want to point out that it is November 11th, 2014, and at this point, the Chicago Blackhawks still have more wins in this calendar year of 2014 than the Bears do at Soldier Field.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't even know what to say about the Bears. They're just god-awful. How do they win 3 games is my question.
Well, I mean, they have to further that, I mean, they have the same amount of wins as the Chicago Bulls do in Soldier Field.
Which is none.
But yeah, your Packers still looking good. They're still a game behind Detroit.
Yeah,
right there.
That Saints game's going to hurt them, I think, in the long run. But Clay Matthews, they made the move to inside linebacker, seemed to work out okay. So I forget who I heard. So I think Tony Dungy said this might be what sets their defense, puts their defense in a better spot. We'll see, because that's still going to be a problem for them. The offense clearly can score points, but the defense has got it. Even I know they only played the Bears, but they've still got to toughen up that defense. It's just not quite Super Bowl level, I don't think, with the Packers.
We'll move to Monday night, and with Nick Foles out, Mark Sanchez took the helm of the Eagles. Didn't know what you were going to get from him, his first start in a few years. And he throws for 332 yards and a 45-21 beatdown of the Panthers. Mark Sanchez's first 300-yard passing game since
ever
the fumble game.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So good for you, Mark Sanchez.
Jeez, I maybe, you know what? I think I said it a couple weeks ago. If Chip Kelly can make Mark Sanchez into a good quarterback, I think they should make a bronze statue of him. And just, I don't know what to say about it, because this is not what I expected out of Sanchez at all.
No, but I mean, it's 1 week, and the Panthers. I mean, we thought they were going to regress, and they had kind of an uptick early in the season, but now they're really kind of hitting their stride as not being nearly as good as they were last year.
No, I mean, look at that points allowed, 281.
Oh, it was awful. Cam Newton looked terrible.
Yeah.
For a good stretch. I mean, he ended up throwing for 306, but 3 interceptions. He was getting roughed up all over the place. It's
if the Eagles, if Mark Sanchez can step in and play well for this Eagles team, they're going to be a handful in the playoffs. Yeah. But I don't know that I'm ready to think that far ahead with Mark Sanchez as your quarterback.
9 sacks for the Eagles in this game on Cam Newton.
Wow.
Wow.
And the Eagles
good showing by the defense.
Not known for their defense, yeah.
No, and we had some kind of concerns with D'Amico Ryan going out, but that's obviously for naught. So the Eagles 7-2, still on top of the NFC East by a half game over the Cowboys. Let's look ahead to next week real quick. Only 4 teams on a bye week.
Is this the last week for bye weeks, I hope?
I believe so.
Good.
Let me check real quick. No, there's bye weeks in week 12. Only two teams with the bye in week 12, and then that is it.
You probably don't remember back when they used to have 2 bye weeks, do you?
That would sound terrible.
It was terrible. I mean, it was just awful, but we'll get the bye weeks out of the way, and we'll finally get back to good football, we hope, every weekend.
So Dallas gets a bye week, which,
that helps.
That helps for them. But actually, the NFL did us all a favor with the Jets, Jacksonville, and Baltimore all having a bye week this week. So some terrible teams taking the week off.
Good.
But we start with the Thursday night clash of 5 and 4 teams, AFC East rivals, the Bills and Dolphins.
Where's that at?
Miami.
Yeah, I think the Dolphins probably. Dolphins playing pretty good football of late. Although they lost to Detroit, but they're not. They got them off the mats.
Yeah, and they're 5 and 4, and both. I mean, this is another one of those types of games where both these teams need to win if they want to have any sort of shot at a wild card.
Yeah, this is kind of an NFL elimination game, basically.
It is. I mean, it really is. Kind of a loser goes home match,
right?
Sort of thing. Ryan Tannehill versus Kyle Orton.
Boy, there's a clash of the Titans right there.
That's a sexy matchup. But we'll move to Sunday. Vikings, Bears. Ugh.
Yeah.
Browns, Texans. Here's an interesting one. Chiefs, Seahawks. Both teams 6 and 3.
Where's it playing? Where's it being played?
Kansas City.
I like the Chiefs in that one.
Yeah, both teams with really good home field advantages in terms of noise. Chiefs 3-1 at home so far this season. So that'll be an interesting one to keep your eye on.
Chiefs have only given up 151 points this season, which I looking at it quickly. Nope, I'll take that back to Lions. But after that, second best points allowed. Yeah, so.
No, Chiefs again being quietly good.
Yep.
Alex Smith doing well. The defense really propelling them. And Jamal Charles, since he's come back, has been electric also.
Yeah, he's a pretty good player, that Jamal Charles. Not bad.
Falcons, Panthers.
Some of these they should just cancel. I mean, why subject fans to these games? Just
3-6 versus 3-6-1.
Wow.
Gross. Bengals, Saints. Buccaneers, Washington.
Ooh.
Oh, God. Broncos, Rams. That should be a walk.
Yeah, Broncos.
It's in St. Louis, though, so maybe.
You know what, though? The way the Rams have played against good teams this year, who knows?
Yeah. Giants, 49ers.
Okay.
Not
Where
either.
at?
In New York.
The 49ers better not show up. They better pay attention on that one.
Uh-huh. The Raiders, one of their few shots to get a victory as they travel to San Diego.
Yeah, San Diego, boy.
They've fallen off a cliff.
Yeah, talk about a team that we thought was going to be really good, and they're just turning out to be the same old thing again this year.
Let's see what they do coming off a bye week. But here's where the good games get. Eagles, Packers in Lambeau.
Ooh, that'll be a track meet.
Lions, Cardinals in Glendale.
That's going to be a slugfest.
The Sunday nighter is Colts, Patriots in Indianapolis.
I like the Colts in that one.
It's always a good game.
Yeah.
And it's a better game when it's in Indy.
Yep.
Because you don't have to deal with the stupid snow.
Yep.
And then the Monday nighter, Steelers, Titans.
Well, 10 years ago, that would have been a really great game.
Yeah, there are some really bad games this week.
There really are, yeah.
But there are some good ones. Seahawks, Chiefs, Pats, Colts,
Eagles,
Packers,
yeah.
Lions, Cardinals.
This will be a chance to see if this is where the Packers defense, they can really give us an indication if they've really pulled it together or not, because it's either going to be a track meet or something, but that's going to be a good game, I think.
That's going to be a fun one. Fun all over the NFL. This upcoming week, a good slate, but and honestly, it's kind of fun when these terrible teams play each other because somebody has to win, and sometimes they're either just the worst games you've ever seen in your life, or they can be a little entertaining. So,
well, somebody doesn't have to win. The Bengals and Panthers showed us that.
Well,
I'm predicting. I'm going to predict it right now. We're going to have our second tie of the year this weekend in one of those awful games. Yep.
Could you imagine if the Panthers and Falcons tied, and the Panthers had a 3-6-2 record? What do you do with that?
I'm trying to think of when the last time the team had two ties in a season. It's got to have been a long time ago.
Hopefully never.
I think it's happened, actually. But, that's one where I think they should give me some of my money back on my NFL Sunday ticket because I'm paying for that game, even though I will never watch it.
Yeah, but it's available if you so choose.
Right.
Quickly run down the division leaders real quick. Philly's on top of the NFC East, 7-2. Dallas right behind them, 7-3. Detroit 7-2. Green Bay right behind them at 6-3. New Orleans 4-5. Carolina, they're 3-6-1. They're still technically.
They're what? Is that like a game and 0.25 out? How do we figure that?
A game and 3/4.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't know. I really don't know. Arizona's 8-1, Seattle 6-3. New England's on top of the AFC East 7-2. Miami right behind it. Miami and Buffalo 5-4 right behind them. They're not right behind them, but they exist. Cleveland, your first place Cleveland Browns 6-3.
Unbelievable.
Leading the Cincinnati Bengals at 5-3-1. Indy's 6-3. Houston behind them 4-5. Denver's 7-2. Kansas City at 6-3.
I thought the Colts. It seems funny. The Colts don't seem like a 6-3 team to me. They seem better than that.
Well, they started off 0-2, and they were the two tight games to Denver and Philly. So, I mean, it's not like the two losses. They have the one bad loss against Pittsburgh, but other than that, they've been playing really well this season.
Nobody talking a lot about him.
Ahmad Bradshaw being healthy in the backfield has really helped them out in terms of not necessarily running the ball, but at least catching balls out of the backfield.
And at least giving the appearance of a threat of a running game, at least, yeah.
And the rushing defense has been pretty good. But, of course, to be perfectly honest, and I don't want to sound like a homer, Andrew Luck's the MVP right now.
I would say so, yeah.
The Colts are first in passing yards, and Luck has been just on a tear.
Well,
26 touchdowns so far this season.
I guess you could argue. You can always argue Manning and Brady because, I mean, honestly, but
I think Andrew Luck is really. I mean, maybe he's not the MVP. Maybe I am a little biased. They probably give it to Brady at this point, but I think for the first time in his career, he is legitimately entrenched in the MVP race between two top quarterbacks.
Yeah, and I'm just going to say it again real quick. Do you still want Kaepernick or RG3 or any of those guys over him still, people?
Yeah, well.
He's a pretty good quarterback.
Pretty decent.
Yeah.
But I think that's going to do it. For Greg, I'm Zach. This has been Basically a Football Show. Follow all of our platforms. Follow the Basically a Podcast Network. Follow the Classic Rock Cast. Greg has a very interesting guest this week.
Yes, I just real quick plug on that. Mitch LaFon, a guy that's been covering rock music for a very long time. We did a nice 2-hour interview last night, and I thought it was very interesting. I'm going to put it up. We'll see if you guys think the same thing, but it was really, guys, talk to everybody. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, sounds like it'll be a good time. For Greg, I'm Zach. We'll talk to you next week. Enjoy the football.